This is my modern Rogue Monster Light power rack and adjustable bench. Let's see how they stack up against an almost 40-year-old all-in-one gym from York Barbell. Let's go. If you search the used market like I do, then you probably see old benches like this. And they are cheap compared to modern benches. Even a cheap bench off of Amazon is usually more expensive than what I see benches like this listed for. So is it worth it? Is it safe? I don't know, but I'm about to find out. And of course, let's go into the history of what exactly this is from York Barbell, because about 40 years ago, back in 1985, this was pretty state-of-the-art for the home gym, and I'll show you why in this video. If you want to support the channel, the best thing you can do right now is to hit the like button, maybe share this with a friend or family member, and drop a comment and let me know how I'm doing. Have you ever seen a bench like this? You can also support the channel by going to my Amazon affiliate link that's in the description. You can buy whatever you want on Amazon. You can get a new soccer ball for your kid if you want. It has no bearing on what I say about this bench or have any relationship with what I'm about to say in this video. It's just a way of leaving a little tip for me and my channel the same way that you would at a restaurant. So head to the description, hit that Amazon link, and then shop on Amazon just like you would any other time. Now let's get to this bench. What is it? I dug into my Strength and Health library, and what I found was this September 1985 issue. Check out those happy people in the 1980s. And what I found was that powerlifting was recognized by York by this point, because the number one often mentioned thing about these old benches is how narrow the uprights are. What I found interesting was that in this Strength and Health magazine, York was already offering an international power bench. It has a length of 48 inches. That's wider than my Rogue Monster Light rack. So that is quite a hefty looking bench. And that is vastly different than the bench that I'm currently sitting on. I mean, I'm really not that big of a man. I'm like 6 foot tall, 200 pounds. But when I sit on this thing, I look like Brian Shaw. So what are the dimensions here? The uprights are 16 inches. The bench itself is 43 inches long, and it's about 9.5 inches wide. I can tell you just off the top of my head that my Rogue bench is about 11 inches wide, and that's not even with like a Thompson fat pad. That's just with the competition pad that I bought with the adjustable bench. So this is quite narrow compared to what you might find on a modern bench. The uprights are certainly narrow compared to my modern rack. At the time, there was a stark difference in the 1980s between what you would use if you were on an elite competitive level and what you would use if you were a home gym owner. So let's take a look at what you can do with this all-in-one gym. So the all-in-one gym featured an all-in-one bench. The all-in-one bench, it says, can be used as a flat bench, an adjust-incline, and multi-purpose bench. The adjust-incline feature is pretty slick. It's a piece of tubing that slides within a bracket that you can then adjust to various incline positions. The all-in-one bench retailed in 1985 for $87.95, or you could buy it with 5 accessories for $269.95. 1985, $270, that was an investment. So let's look at these accessories, because this one that I found on the used market came with several of the accessories. Let's start out by just talking about the bench press, the intended purpose of a bench. These narrow uprights, the main danger is that they make it tough to load the bar, because the bar is more apt to flip over since there's a narrow support system for it with the narrow uprights. So as you load a bar on this bench, or any bench like it from this era that's narrow, you really want to keep a hand on the bar and make sure it's not going to flip over. I'm not loading this super heavy, but just enough to show you that the other thing was, as I get into position, it was a little weird wedging my head between these narrow uprights. There's plenty of space. It's not like I was getting squeezed, but it feels odd. You're used to the roomy kind of nature of your modern power rack or modern squat stands, or even your modern bench that you might have. So that took some getting used to. The other thing to be careful of is that when you re-rack the bar when benching, that you get it into the J-cup. These J-cups are cut from steel. They're very good quality, but they're only about 3 inches high. So if you have longer arms like me, it's completely possible that you would miss the J cup, and that would be a disastrous thing. Next up for working the chest would be dips. So this bench comes with these dip handles that you can put into the same holes that you pull the uprights out of, and you can do some dips. This felt a little precarious because the little bolts that you screw into it don't exactly go into the holes that are on the dip attachments. You have to just kind of like tighten them down. And by looking at the dip attachments, I can see that originally that's what the original owners did. It still held my weight at 200 pounds, and I did some dips, but it didn't feel as solid as my Mutant Metals UDA. Moving on to lower body, you can do squats with these squat stands that come with it, and they plug in and widen the base that you start out with. The model in the advertisement had been doing squats outside of the bench. I did them within the bench. I just felt safer doing it that way in my backyard. I don't know if it's the right way or not. I feel like I hit depth. I don't know. But it just felt right in my backyard doing them that way. My standard bar I had out here wasn't wide enough for these, so you'll have to make sure that if you're using these wider squat stands, you have at least a 6 foot to 7 foot barbell. This 5 foot barbell just didn't cut it. In addition to that, something I didn't do, but that I had to ask the Vintage York Barbell Owners Facebook group for help with, would be these square notches below the uprights and the squat stands. I asked in the Facebook group, hey, does anyone know what these are for? Big thanks to Jeff for responding that you could do a leg press with them. You could put a bar across, and then with the uprights sliding up and down, you could lay down and do a leg press. I didn't try that, and immediately my first thought was that I have pretty long legs, and I would fear that the upright would slide right out and off. I've seen Strongman Archaeology James doing leg press without any type of frame or anything, and if I wanted to lay down and do a leg press with some danger involved, I'd probably just do it that way instead of hooking it up to this frame. The last attachment that this particular pickup came with would be the Preacher Curl Pad. The Preacher Curl Pad fits into the upright holes just like the other attachments, and I was pretty impressed with it. Out of all the attachments, it's the one I think really holds up to modern times the most. The angle was nice, the pad was sufficiently large, and the padding seemed pretty good for 40 years old. As far as the padding on this, listen, it's a piece of plywood with some padding, and then it's been upholstered. Compared to modern benches from leading companies like Rogue or Rep, it pales in comparison to the bench pad you're going to get on those benches. But compared to some of the cheaper benches that I see on Amazon or at Walmart, this holds up for being almost 40 years old. So that brings me to our wrap up here. Should you buy this thing? Well, in terms of safety, I'm no expert, so proceed at your own will. Don't come back and bug me if you injure yourself. However, you can stay fairly safe with a narrow vintage bench like this as long as you keep a hand on that barbell anytime you're loading it, and even better if you load it with a partner and you're working out with a training partner. You can also stay safe by only loading one plate at a time. I loaded up several at a time on one end, and that was silly. In terms of the functionality of it, you're going to get just about the same function, if not more, than a cheaper bench. So where I'm going with this is, if you're not ready to drop the money on a bench that's a little more expensive and has a little better quality in terms of the thickness of the frame and the tubing, this is at least 1x1 steel. Take a look at how thin the metal is, and I don't even know if I should call it steel, on some of the cheaper benches that you might buy today. At least this vintage bench has some pretty thick steel frame tubing and pieces that have been welded together. That in itself makes it a sturdier frame than something you might see today. The padding tends to hold up, and in terms of pricing, I can't give you a guarantee. I don't know where you live, but at least around me, older benches like this tend to sell really cheap, if at all. So if you fall into that category, a vintage bench like this might just be what you need. at least until you get enough money to buy a better quality modern bench. Thanks so much for watching. This is Rob from VintageWeightsPGH. Please like, subscribe, drop a comment, and let me know what you thought of this video. And if you enjoyed this video, then please, the next time you shop on Amazon, click on my link available on my website or in any of my video descriptions, and you'll still get the same pricing as always, but you'll leave a little tip for VintageWeightsPGH and help out the channel. Thanks, everybody.